Welcome back to Words of Life. I'm Bernie Dake and excited to welcome back Lieutenant Colonel Eddie Hobgood.
Hey, thank you. Excited to be here.
Now, if our listeners were here last week, they know that we are right in the middle of this story where you've been given an opportunity to create a one-man show about a Salvation Army, an early Salvation Army character named Joe the Turk. But let's start there. Let's pick up right where we left off.
Yeah, sure. So I had the privilege to create this one-man show about this incredible salvationist. And as the Territorial Youth Secretary, I got to travel around to all of the various youth councils and present that as my keynote.
Nice.
We had a territorial commander, Commissioner Max Feener, who was attending one of the youth councils, and he saw it. And I guess a couple of years later, I'd moved on. I was the General Secretary in Florida at the time, and my boss, my divisional commander, comes into my office and says, the territorial commander would like to ask you, would like you to write a musical for an upcoming Congress about Samuel Logan Bringle. And I'm like, I can't do that. I've never written a musical before.
And Samuel Logan Bringle is what we often consider the Salvation Army's holiness ambassador.
Yep, I call him the prophet. If we had prophets, but we're a nonprofit organization, but if we had prophets, Samuel Logan Bringle would be our prophet of holiness.
Yeah,
absolutely. So I said, I don't have that capacity. I've never done that. And so after a meeting, a face-to-face meeting with the commissioner, it was decided I would write a musical about Commissioner Bringle. Which absolutely was a phenomenal experience.
Yeah.
I studied up, I watched as many musicals as I could, that sort of thing, and we were able to present that at the Territorial Congress in 2008 using all of the cadets, and we brought in some outside cast and other Salvationists, a cast of over 100.
Yeah.
And so from that, a couple years later, I received another assignment asking if I would write another musical. And I felt very led at that time to write one about William and Catherine Booth, the founders of the Salvation Army, and the founding of the Salvation Army, and it was called Our People.
Our People, yeah.
Yeah, and so that was another incredible experience because we got to record the soundtrack with an orchestra up in Washington, D.C., and again, we used the cadets and some outside Salvationists to make up the cast and do that and present that, and just another great highlight of my life. From that, there was an officer sitting in the audience, a special guest from International Headquarters, Commissioner Kenneth Hodder, who was the International Legal Secretary at the time. And from that, he saw the musical, and there had been some rumors floating around that there was going to be an international congress in London to celebrate the 150th anniversary of the Salvation Army. And Commissioner Hodder goes back and speaks to General Linda Bond and says, I think I know someone that we can bring over to help organize this Congress. And so in January of 2012, we get a phone call from Commissioner Barry Swanson, the International Chief of the Staff, saying that we've been appointed, my wife Kathy and I have been appointed to International Headquarters to coordinate and execute the 150th anniversary of the Salvation Army.
Which, like many churches have big congresses or big special weeks to celebrate the life of the church or the work that God's doing through them. That was the Salvation Army's
we had 16,000 people convened from over 70, 80 countries for that 5-day period. And we were online. We had more than 2 million views. Matter of fact, on the second day of Congress, which is Founders Day, July the 2nd, we had more social media views than Wembley, which was going on at the very same time. We trended higher than Wembley did on that
Incredible.
day. So, yeah. So, from this little kid from the wrong side of the tracks, seeing a production of Oliver in the third grade to the biggest concert venue practically in Europe, the O2 Arena, to execute the International Congress of the Salvation Army, blows my mind to think that the circumstances surrounding my birth, that God would deem me worthy to be involved in something significant in his kingdom. It's overwhelming.
Eddie, it's overwhelming to me too, because it's not just musical theater. It's not just musical encouragement. You have been a part of groundbreaking work for years. I mean, you started the work that ended up being Transmission, which is, the Southern Territory's still current contemporary Christian group that's creating resources every year for people to use and worship. You were a big part of that. You've now, after the International Congress, you've published a book about that character that you performed in Washington, D.C. back in 1992. And that had become a passion for you. I remember you collecting articles and just constantly doing work at home that, none of us really knew the depth of until you started showing us some of the things that you were finding. Yeah. Tell us about that. Who is this guy, Joe the Turk?
Well, I was first of all introduced to Joe Turk as a junior soldier because there was, for those of you that don't know what junior soldiers is, but it's really kind of like junior church, a Bible study for elementary age kids. And in the day when I was a junior soldier, it was a combination of Bible study and Salvation Army history. And one particular season, the Salvation Army produced these trading cards, like we do the baseball cards, of Salvation Army heroes of the faith. And Joe the Turk was one of those heroes of the faith. So that was my really first introduction to him, but it was just a trading card. His picture on the front and about a paragraph about him on the back, and that was it. So when I was asked to do this presentation about Joe in Washington, D.C., I started doing some research, and there was nothing to be found. I mean, scarce little to be found. So after that, I'm like, you know what? I've got to find out some more stuff about this guy because he's so interesting, and I don't know what it is, but I feel this kinship to him. So whenever I would have the privilege to go to the national headquarters of the Salvation Army in Washington, D.C., and the territorial headquarters in New York, I would always schedule a day to stay over just to do research. And so I started digging through the files and old war cries, the national periodical of the Salvation Army, the War Cry, back to the very beginning of its history in the United States, and started finding article after article after article. And then I took out a subscription for a year to newspapers.com and started going through every one of those years to see what newspaper articles I could find. And I accumulated 12 4-inch binder notebooks full of war cry, newspaper, personal correspondence, Salvation Army correspondence. And so I had this real treasure trove of stuff, and found out things of Joe that nobody living would have had any idea about. And so I'm like, okay, this has got to become a book, but I'm not a book writer. So that, I probably could have done it years earlier than I did, but I just didn't feel like I had that kind of capacity in me. So I kind of put it off, and I made up the excuse. I need to transcribe it all into Word documents because some of it was pretty tattered and torn, and had to get a magnifying glass to read some of it. But I did. I got it all done, and then I had no more excuses. And by this time, I had retired from Salvation Army, active Salvation Army officership. And so in my evenings, I would take a couple of hours each night just to get it all organized by year chronologically, and then started going through and picking out what I thought were the most interesting and obscure stories about Joe. And it took me about 8 months to actually write the book. But it was easier. Actually, my excuse helped me write it a lot more easily than I could have, because I had it transcribed. And I could just copy and paste, and then write it out into my own words. So
Eddie, the thing about your story to me and Joe the Turk and all of the parallels that exist are, this guy's a colorful character. He was someone that wanted attention, but not for himself. He was trying to draw people to Jesus, which has defined your life. Tell our listeners more about Joe the Turk. Who was this guy?
Well, Joe was a Turkish immigrant actually Armenian immigrant, born in Turkey, and he had to flee Turkey because of the persecution of the Armenians by the Turks, because Armenia is a Christian nation. And because the Armenians would not convert to Mohammedanism, they were persecuted. And by the hundreds of thousands, they were murdered.
Wow.
So Joe fled Turkey and went to live with his brother, Simon, who lived in the United States in Worcester, Massachusetts. Along the way, he missed his connection. The ship missed its connection in England and had to spend 8 days in Liverpool. While he was in Liverpool, he encountered the Salvation Army. He didn't speak any English, so he didn't really understand, except there was a priest who was traveling with him who spoke English, so he understood what was happening and said, these are religious people. They're good people. But he saw them being persecuted. Back in the day, we're talking the late 1800s. Joe was born in 1860. He left in the early 1880s to come to the United States. So the army was being heavily persecuted by another army called the Skeleton Army, which were these ruffians that were hired by bartenders and drug dealers to run the army off, because the army was getting people saved left and right at their open air meetings, and people were getting saved, stopped drinking, stopped doing drugs, stopped being prostitutes. And so these people who were benefiting off of this this work, they didn't like it, so let's get rid of the Salvation Army. So the army was getting beaten up left and right badly. So Joe saw this happening, and before the 8 days were over, he was following behind the Salvation Army parade with a big stick, whacking anybody that came up to try to bother him. So he leaves, he goes to America, he forgets about the Salvation Army, he lives with his brother Simon for about a year, and then he gets this urge to go west, young man.
Yeah.
And so he does. He makes his way to San Francisco, California, and he falls into this kind of bad life himself, drinking and fighting and brawling and all this sort of stuff. But about 6 months after he arrives in San Francisco, the Salvation Army does as well. He reconnects with them. And again, he sees the army being persecuted for the very same reasons it was in England. And he kind of becomes the army's unofficial bodyguard, doing the same thing, beating people off, not getting converted yet. But one night he witnesses an open air meeting where the bass drummer gets smashed in the face with a whiskey bottle and just destroys the guy's face, and he falls to the ground. And the guy, although he's bleeding profusely and he's in this pain, he finds his drumstick and he starts beating it and encouraging the Salvationists, I'm messed up here, but you're not. Keep preaching, keep playing, keep praying. And that melted Joe's heart. And that night he knelt on the street corner in front of that drum and he gave his heart to Jesus Christ. And he, shortly thereafter, became a Salvation Army officer. He spent the next 38 years of his life traveling the United States, preaching the gospel of Jesus Christ. Now, what makes him so unique is that, and you talk about innovation and things like that. It's funny, when I flew into the airport this morning, there's a big sign coming down the escalator that says, "Innovation, pass it on."
Yeah.
And every time I see the word innovation, I think of Joe. He was the master of innovation. And you got to remember, even all Salvationists in those days were innovators because they were doing something that had never been done before.
Right.
Church on the street, the military church, all these things that the Army, brass banding, all of that was brand new. The Army was incredibly innovative in its early day. And Joe, I think, took it a step further because while he wore the traditional black uniform,
He didn't like it.
He didn't like it, no. And so he adopted these multicolor uniforms that were very Turkish and Armenian in nature. And they got him noticed when he would march up and down the street. He was a great musician. He could play instruments by ear, cornet, saxophone, clarinet, and he would utilize those in his open-air meetings. He'd stand on a chair, he'd play, and it would be like the Pied Piper. They would just come out by the hundreds and sometimes the thousands to hear him preach. He looked at things that were just ordinary objects and figured out how he could use them for the gospel. A zonophone, which we know as a gramophone, which we know as a record player.
Yeah.
When it first came out, he bought one and he got records and of orchestras playing, and because he could play by ear, he would play along with them. So
Wow.
it was like he was giving a concert. I say he was the original karaoke guy.
That's right.
So those kinds of things, the umbrella that had gospel slogans on it,
Yeah.
walking testimony everywhere he went, just incredibly innovative. And it was those kinds of things that drew people to hear him. The other thing was, while he was not technically Turkish, he was haphazardly given the nickname of Joe the Turk. That was not his name. His name was Nishan der Garabedian, Joseph Garabed, shortened when he came to the States. But an Irish drinking buddy called him Joe the Turk one day. You don't look like a Joseph or a John. You look like a Joe, and you're from Turkey, so I'm going to call you Joe the Turk. And it stuck. But what you have to understand is during those days, the Turks, and you got to understand how rural America was. There was no television, no radio. It was the newspaper and the telegraph.
Yeah.
That was pretty much it. Turks were known as barbarians around the world because of the massacres and also because of their history of all the other nations that they conquered. And so when it was announced in the newspaper that a real live Turk was coming to town, especially in the smaller communities, people would just come out of the woodwork to see this barbarian. And so all of these things he used to his advantage, or to the advantage of proclaiming the gospel.
Yeah.
And of course, the other thing that he's very famous for is he was thrown into jail 52 times during his officership for preaching the gospel on the street corners. There was no such thing as freedom of speech for the Salvation Army in those days.
Wow.
And many, many times, and not just Joe, but across the entire United States, Salvationists were thrown into jail for standing on the street corner and preaching the gospel because many people, especially religious people, believed it was crude and crass and not dignified to present the gospel in that manner, that it was not really a gospel for all people.
Well, Eddie, there's just not enough time in a day for me to get this story out of your soul and into the ears of our listeners. But I must say, I think one day, just like you've written a book about Joe the Turk, someone's going to write a book about you. And I thank God for you.
Well, thank you, Bernie, and I thank God for you. We've had some amazing experiences over the years, and have been involved in some serious ministry.
Absolutely.
And I give God all the glory for that, but I also give God glory for the Salvation Army.
Amen.
Because if it were not for the Salvation Army, I wouldn't be sitting here today.
Yeah.
And I've never known you.
That's right.
And what a blessing you've been to my life.
There's a great line in a song, If I Might, by William Himes, that says, take every passion, take every skill, take all my dreams and bend them to your will. And your life story truly just aligns with that perfectly. God has taken those dreams and that passion and used it for his glory with someone just that happened to be on the wrong side of the tracks in Greenville, North Carolina. Bless you. Where can our listeners find this book or learn more about the things that you've been able to produce?
Well, if you're interested in any of the musicals, www.tsamusicals.org. We'll have all of those there.
Free,
absolutely, and downloadable.
Yeah.
So, the soundtracks, the backing tracks, the sheet
Scripts.
music, scripts, all that. And even one of the recorded performances of Joe the Turk is on there as well. So thank you for that gift. If you're interested in the book, it's called The Sanctified Showman. And if your trade department does not have it, you can get it at www.christianbook.com.
There you go.
And they've got them in stock.
Yeah. Eddie, thank you so much for coming back home to Atlanta today to share your story with our listeners. We pray that God continues to use you well into your retirement. There's still more to come.
Yeah, I believe it.
God bless you.
Thank you.